Else
Realm
Hello, I'm Mark,
And I'm Ruth.
and welcome to the Else Realm Diner. It came from the swirling depths of the multiverse, a sentient cafe, a cosmic mystery, transporting its clientele through all manner of realms. No one knows where the diner came from. All we know is that it seeks interesting conversation, warm memories, and good banter.
On the menu today is the Elder Scrolls 5 Skyrim.
Yep. Da-da-da, 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 da-da-da.
I believe
Sorry, go on.
I believe I've been told off for doing that before.
You have. That's a good point. Yeah. Just
Anyway, I enjoyed that a lot.
well, just a wee insight, folks. I mean, last week we did try to record this, but clearly my head was in the clouds or at my fundament, so I wasn't quite in the right mood. But this week we are in the mood, and we're ready to talk about Skyrim and our experience with what is now a 12-year-old computer game. It's just incredible in so many ways that Skyrim has had the longevity that it's had as an entry in the Elder Scrolls series. But I suppose, not everyone listening to this will necessarily have played Elder Scrolls or understand what we're talking about. And so to give a little bit of context to this, I'm hoping most of you have played it, by the way, but I guess it's worthwhile looking at initially Elder Scrolls. I mean, what was your first Elder Scrolls experience, Ruth?
My first Elder Scrolls experience was Morrowind, and it was not a good experience, actually.
Okay.
I found it was a difficult to navigate game. I found it difficult to level up. I found that I needed a lot of knowledge prior to starting that I didn't have, because
Yeah.
I hadn't played Dungeons and Dragons before, and so my initial Elder Scrolls entry was pretty unsuccessful, which was a bit annoying because I think if I'd persisted more or got past that, I probably would have absolutely loved Morrowind, but it was just a block on in terms of how to get into it. So my first positive thing about the Elder Scrolls was Skyrim.
Yeah. No, I think I can appreciate that in so much as one of the things. I mean, we both came late, I think, didn't we, to D&D, and yet.
Yeah.
It actually playing Dungeons and Dragons and understanding what it is. I've always been aware of it. It turns up in pop culture, and I knew about polyhedral dice from my friends and in high school, etc. But I never really got into it and never really understood what it could do. And in that sense, I'd always wanted something like it. And when I first heard about Skyrim especially on websites like IGN, etc., I went looking for its prequel. I went looking for Oblivion, which was released initially in 2006, I think. Yeah. And by then, just before that 11/11/11 release date, that once in a lifetime Skyrim release, they'd released the Game of the Year edition with all the DLC, and I had similar problems. I think the leveling up was an issue. The relationship between your character and your class and your for example your armor set had to be so carefully managed and calibrated. And also, I think you had to make decisions right at the beginning of the game, presumably based on an idea that I guess certainly you do now. I think a lot with Skyrim, having a build in mind for your character. So you had to know what you were going to do going in, not only in terms of...
And then, there was no prospect for change, was there?
No.
In fact, if you did things that were outside of your skill set from your initial idea, it didn't contribute to you leveling up.
Exactly, which is counterintuitive in a game that also on the face of it had a lot of freedom. And the thing is, Oblivion, I played, I don't know, maybe a few hours of it, and very quickly realised I wasn't enjoying it, and I wasn't enjoying it for a few different reasons. I mean, so that was one of them. The other one was from a gameplay perspective. I didn't like the animation of the character. So in third person, the character just rotates on the spot as opposed to actually stepping. It's a small thing, but it makes you feel like you're just, well, in a computer game, if your character just is like a cylinder and their feet don't move when you're turning them in combat, this kind of thing. But also the
Well, it
overall,
sort of tells you, doesn't it, in a way that you're not supposed to play the game like that because the
yeah,
developers haven't
yeah.
developed that aspect.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, in that sense, yeah, they're thinking about it as well, we're thinking about that one as a first person game, and I guess its origins were basically in the first person for the most part on PC. But also as well, the whole of Oblivion is very shiny, very glossy, very high contrast colors. It's meant to, I guess, reflect the wealth and the cultural heart of Tamriel in that sense, as Cyrodiil, the province. But I just couldn't connect with it. It didn't feel quite right, especially considering what we were seeing on the Skyrim trailers. Yeah, that breathless running through snowy mountains, on a mountaintop, hearing a voice going, "The dragons have returned," and then suddenly having to fight or see a dragon coming up over the crest of a mountain, and you're just, you see your character just there in front of them. It had all the high adventure, the fantasy that I was hoping for, but also with a slightly sort of muted color scheme. It felt a bit more grounded, and I think that's what what was intriguing me, I guess, about it. Also, do you remember the live action trailer as well, where there was someone walking into a town, and you have all these grubby faced actors sort of looking up and being all kind of like, "Who's this?"
No, my literally, I first heard of Skyrim from a sixth form student.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I was teaching a lesson and this kid starts talking about Skyrim, and he sold it to me in like 5 minutes. So he was saying that you can see these two hands in front of you,
Mm-hmm.
and they sort of wiggle and move around, um, and make magic,
Mm-hmm.
and you're just like boom, boom, boom. And I know you can't see my gestures on this, but like I was just like, what? And he's like, and it's really pretty, and you just go places and there's things to see and talk to people. And I was like, okay, I am sold. And I literally went and bought a PS3 and Skyrim
in order to play it. Yeah.
in order to play it, because
Yeah.
I was like, yeah, I was like, this is what I need in my life right now.
Well, and
And then I don't think I looked up for 6 months.
well, and that does seem to be your you're a passionate when you have a passion, you get into it, don't you? But it seems to be your way with this game is that you're either playing it or you're living your life. There's one
Yeah.
there's one or the
I
other.
definitely don't have a healthy relationship with this game. I do find it an incredibly immersive experience.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh. Well, and it is. It's a fantastic experience. But for example, since Christmas, well, you basically got back into the game around Christmas, having recommended it to your sister-in-law, haven't you?
Yeah.
And seeing you two playing that, and seeing you keep on popping up on my Switch notifications saying, Ruth is online and she's playing Skyrim. I thought, oh, okay, I'm gonna play Skyrim again. I'm gonna get back into it. And I first played the game on the Xbox 360 years ago when I was looking for a job. In back in the northeast of England, in a flat. It was quite a depressing time, and it was a wonderful bit of escapism. But I played to level 40, and then sort of let it drift off. I dipped in and out on
And
PC.
can we just point out here, you thought you had fully experienced that game.
No, I thought I'd done a lot. I thought I'd done a lot. Yeah, but well, and also in that time, according to Steam, somehow the Xbox and Microsoft accounts connected. The stats on Steam said that I'd done about 235-ish, 36 hours in total.
You're going to embarrass me now.
No. Well, I'm just thinking it's not embarrassing. I think it's an achievement, but On Switch alone, Ruth, you have played now more than 650 hours of Skyrim. That's impressive. That's really
Yeah.
quite impressive. But and also, it's I think it's also actually testament though. And again, that's just the Switch. That doesn't count your PS3, etc. But it's testament though, I think, to the quality of the game. The fact that it can keep people coming back and exploring. And I don't think it's about being hooked. People get hooked on Candy Crush, don't they? And
Oh
that's
no,
and
it's
that
nothing
sort of
like.
stuff.
Well, maybe it's time to sort of say a little bit what it's like to play,
Yeah, yeah.
because, I mean, so you
So
start off
well,
as
sorry. Just let me just finish that. In so much as I think you're still discovering things. That's the thing I'm impressed by.
oh yeah,
You know what I mean? So
absolutely. I
yeah,
still come across things and I'm like, oh, what's this?
yeah.
Um, but yeah, so the Skyrim game is kind of unique, I think, in what it is,
Hmm.
and it is, I think, inspired a lot of things
Mm-hmm.
subsequently,
Mm-hmm.
and it was a massive step up from the other games. But basically, you start off, don't you? You're an unnamed prisoner,
You're
and you're on the
awake.
back of a you're yeah you
Mm-hmm.
you're on the back of a truck, and you end up at a place called Helgen, which is a
Hmm.
little I don't know, little villagey kind of thing.
Yeah,
And
like
you
a
can
small
tell
wall
now
town.
that there's a war happening, and you've got Ulfric with you, who is one leader of the war.
Hmm.
That's the rebellion end of the war, and then the Imperial Guards are about to kill him, and there's a very opportunistically timed dragon attack that's unprecedented
Mm-hmm.
in Skyrim, really, and you escape with well, you can pick that, and that is your first decision.
Mm-hmm.
Really, in game, do you want to go with the Stormcloaks or with the Imperials? And you end up in I mean, and this is kind of the tutorial bit, isn't it?
Hmm.
Like, this, you can sneak, and you can throw single-handed weapons. Oh, here's a bow.
Yep.
Oh, look, there's some magical things,
Yep.
so
Oh
you can
well, and
basically,
also the as you're being guided, you're pointed at a stone in the landscape that will give you a stat buff that will help you with
yeah,
certain things, the skills. Or he literally points at a mountain and says, "Look up there. There's a tomb on the mountain." That kind of thing. So it's
yeah.
introducing you to the world. Yeah.
And then basically, once you've left him, you've got some quests you could go and take, but you are left to your own devices.
Hmm.
And this is where I think the genius of Skyrim comes in, because you can literally do whatever it is that you want.
Yeah.
Um, so you can go and explore the landscape, you can go and stumble across little things. And I mean, the beauty of the game is that the Skyrim developers have literally peppered across the entire world
Hmm. Hmm.
little bits and pieces. Not only, like, you'll stumble across, like, I don't know, there's a mammoth with a mammoth skeleton with a human skeleton inside, and you're just like,
Hmm.
okay. So there's these little details that don't mean to anything. Or you'll come across, I don't know, a headless horseman ghost running across the landscape, and you're
Hmm.
like, okay.
Hmm.
There's random encounters where people try to rob you. There's wild animals that attack. There's
Hmm.
giants. There's
Well,
little places to visit,
yeah, but
caves.
well, and so the landscape is peppered with that, and also has a bit of variation. There's a sort of like a tundra central area. There's a mountainous
Yeah,
region. There's a snowy area. There's a much more forested area to the south. There's the opportunity to go into towns and
yeah,
see people's routines and understand some of the local politics. You can more often than not become a thrall of the town. You can become
a
a
thane.
thane. Sorry, not a thrall, a thane. Essentially a knight or a warrior who the Jarl recognizes, and you can buy property, and you can Well, I don't know about
get
you, but
married,
well, you can
you
get,
can
yeah,
adopt
yeah, yeah,
children, you can make houses, you can save people, you can
yeah.
fight with people, you can become an assassin, you can become a thief,
Well, but
you can become a werewolf, you can become a
well,
vampire.
and this is the thing that I think I'm most impressed by with this game is that they built so that it was a team of about 90 people who made Elder Scrolls 5 Skyrim, and they built this 14.3 I think miles square mile map that's crammed with a set story, so you can go to Whiterun, meet the Jarl, go up the mountain, meet the Greybeards, go from there and do exactly what you're
Yeah, and
told.
that's one of the main quest lines, isn't
Yeah,
it? So that's the Dragonborn
yeah,
quest. And
uh,
that's the quest line that's really the one that's the main quest line, shall we say.
yeah.
And everything else is not the main quest line. But
Well,
I mean, in
well,
all
so
honesty, the
so
main
so
quest line is sorry.
so you can do that, or you can just explore and, as you're saying, discover things for yourself. And for me, that's partly a product of things like having books in the game. There are 337 books in this game, and each one can either be something that you can learn from, something that's a bit of fun. I think you introduced me to the lusty Argonian
Oh
maid.
yeah, there's some erotica
Yeah,
in there. And
Skyrim
there's do you
erotica.
know like there's one place in Skyrim where you can well you haven't played the Dawn Guard DLC, have you? But if you go up to the Dawn Guard DLC, there's a little place on the roof of the castle where there's like a little sleeping bed and there's the lusty Argonian and the man's taking his shoes off and you just like it just tells you a little story of like what this chap's been up to. And the
Yeah.
lusty Argonian, if you've ever read it, is just hilarious.
I recently found volume 2. I'm going to read them both together when I get a
Yeah,
chance.
yeah.
Uh,
It's just so funny.
but also there are
One's about breaking bread, and one's about buffing buffing a sword.
oh, God. Um, so yeah, so there's those little details of the fact that you can use those books. Some of them will be attached to places in the landscape, like the story of a mythological person whose tomb maybe you discover, or the plans of a bandit camp, and you then come across the loot that they. It's knitted together. But I
And
think
there's also like quest starters, aren't there? Like you can read a book about forgotten legends,
yes,
and then that will start a quest of one of the forgotten legends, and you can go and hunt out a special sword or something.
yeah, yeah. But beyond the books, I think the crucial thing about this landscape and its lore is that actually it's built on a foundation of a really solid set of assets that they brought together that could be deployed in various nuanced little ways. So you can have simple things like the deployment of a boat and some potion bottles in that boat, and maybe a treasure chest in the water underneath. And these are things that in a room have their own context, have their own sort of fairly normal. Um, you wouldn't really necessarily think anything of them, but when configured like that in the landscape, they tell a little story. They gave themselves the tools to pull together all these little things that could. So I mean, so for example, there are monsters or witch women called hag ravens in the game, and they're women who've
They're
given
like
over.
half raven, half
Yeah,
human, aren't
sort of
they?
given over part of themselves to be a bird creature, and they're really quite powerful. The first hag raven I ever came across was north of Helgen, and scared the crap out of me.
Yeah, they're really
Um,
powerful
yeah,
magicians, and they tend to hang around with the group of people called the Forsworn, don't they?
yeah,
And they're pretty much into black magic because one of the things that they do is they chop out the heart of the Forsworn warriors
mm,
and put a briar heart into them, which is like a seed of a tree,
hmm,
and then those Forsworn briar hearts are like badass.
yeah,
They're
yeah.
like men without hearts that are just seriously badass.
No, absolutely. But because you don't get the chance to get up close to a hag raven until they're dead for the most part,
Mm.
what they did was, and I was telling you about this yesterday, that really sort of made me chuckle was that there was one quest line where there's a hag raven who's lost her tower to a
Her
rival, her
sister.
sister.
Yeah.
Yeah, and she's just like, help me, and
Yeah. And she calls you meat. She's
yeah,
like, meat.
yeah,
Help.
and
And it's just like,
yeah,
it's like us asking a cow for help.
yeah, yeah, but also,
Steak, come with me. I need your help.
but I just think it speaks of such creativity to have clearly the time and space to not only create this enemy NPC, but also actually maybe have moments in meetings where someone says, "What if one of these solicits your help, and what if you help them fight the way up a tower, and what if how would she reward you, and what would you say?" I think at the end she's basically like, go away, because she just about
Well, she gives you a
recognizes,
staff, doesn't
yeah,
she? She
gives
gives
you
you
a
the hag
staff,
staff,
but
which is a
doesn't want you
powerful
hanging around.
magical staff. But
Yeah.
yeah, there's another encounter where you actually I think there's a quest line. It's called A Night to Remember, which is actually a Daedric quest, which I'll get on to the Daedra in a minute. But so you go to a pub and you get challenged to a drinking competition, and you get blotto. And you wake up the next day in the temple of Debella with a priestess shouting at you about how you came in last night and destroyed the temple, and they're really annoyed with you. And then you have to kind of trace back your steps. Like they won't say what you were saying until you've cleared up the temple.
Yeah.
And then you go, and then you get the next bit, and basically along that you married a hag raven who, like, I have to say, like I always kill her. I'm like, she's like,
My
I think she's,
love.
yeah. I'm just like, ugh. And then I just steal the wedding ring, and it's like, it didn't happen.
It didn't happen. What happened in wherever, Helgen or something, or in Riften, stayed in Riften.
Yeah.
But and so, yeah, it's that richness, not only on the ground but also below the ground. I'll never forget the first time I discovered some of these vast dwarven cities with night skies that seemingly are in the cave roof because of glowing geology, or indeed beyond the veil. When you get to go to places like Sovngarde and this kind of thing, it's a wonderfully realized world in which, and a rich world in which to tell stories. And in that sense, it feels like the game is a dungeon master and you are playing Dungeons and Dragons. That's for me one of the big strengths of it, is that I can experience these stories and discover them, but also as well, I'm not having to sort of trick myself and make them happen for me in that sense.
I think it's also like rich with history and lore, isn't it? Like, everywhere you go, there's like layers of things happening. You've got all the old Nordic tombs, and you've got the modern buildings in the town, and you've got kind of some places where you've got a mix between the two. All the Dwemer stuff is kind of collapsed and in various shades of disrepair or whatever. And yeah, I mean, it manages, doesn't it, to have I think it has a brilliant distinction between the different historical like landmarks and stuff.
No,
and it's very interesting, I think, to read the history and the lore and find out what's going on and stuff. I found that really, like, I didn't think I would enjoy reading a book in a computer game, and then you're like, what's going on here? And then you're like, oh, this is so lovely.
Yeah.
Oh my god.
Well, but also, as you say, yeah, the reading of the game extends to understanding the structures that you're seeing and how they relate to each other in the landscape, and the implied history and so on and so forth. I mean, so a little while ago now, it's a project that's kind of on pause. A friend of mine and we started the Skyrim Archaeological Survey. It's a little blog where we were going tomb by tomb, using a someone had made, still has, it's still up there, basically an encyclopedia map of Skyrim for reference. So you can actually use grid references to locate areas and talk about the flora and the fauna that are around each site. And one of the things that came out of that study that we did, it was fun, I promise you, was a couple of things. I mean, first of all, the structures of these ancient tombs. As you go in, it's clear that they're sort of designed for tending the dead and encouraging a transition from life to death. There are embalming tools around. There are tables near the entrance where you lay out the dead and so on and so forth. But also as well, when you look more closely, there are places where clearly people were restrained, or there are posts with rings on and chains, or there are booby traps that actually, when you look at and think about them, they're designed to almost act like air doors, sort of sealable portals that transition from place to place within the tomb, almost like a
And also, I mean, the question is as well, like, are they there to stop grave robbers or to keep the Draugr inside?
well, and that's the point. Is that I think from what we were examining, we started to believe that they were there to keep the Draugr inside. They were there to compartmentalize almost a contagion of the reanimated dead. But they were being tended by clearly reverent
Priests of
people,
our
priests,
faith,
people who
yeah.
actually had a respect for the dead. Some of the texts in the game talk about how the Draugr might be people who were cursed to come back to life because they had served the dragons in a previous age.
And that does kind of work, doesn't it? Because there's quite a lot of dragon
Iconography and stuff.
lords,
Yeah.
dragon priests, and stuff that come back to life.
Yeah. But also, there's actually an archaeologist in the game who goes to one of the tombs and she spends some time observing them. Eventually they start to ignore her, and she notices that the Draugr are the ones who light the sconces, who keep the tomb tidy.
Oh,
They actually go
interesting.
around. So it answers one of those sort of computer game stereotypical questions of who the
You
hell.
have missed. Right, I know you haven't done this mission yet,
Uh,
but this conversation has just reminded me there's an archaeological dig that you can find on Solstein.
I've just come across that actually.
Oh my
Yeah, yeah.
God, you'll love that
Yeah, I've just
quest.
come across him. Obviously,
Yeah,
there's the dig happening in Sarthol with
yeah.
the Mages College is up to. There's a couple. There's also one in is it Markarth under the mountain.
Is there?
Yeah, where the academic who's looking after the Hall of the Dead is also interested in the Dwarven city, and you can sneak your way in, or you can anyway. The point is,
Oh, sorry.
yeah.
Yes.
So there is archaeology. So he has a whole museum as well to
Yeah,
the
he
Dwemer.
does.
So the point is
Calcelmo.
there is this archaeology, but also that I love that sort of in-universe answer to why on earth are all the lamps lit in this tomb when I go in? Why the answer is the undead are tending the place, and this. I mean, just very briefly, this brings two things to mind. First of all, the design of those tombs is fascinating because I mean, I think you've said to me in the past how you appreciate the way that you go in through a winding route and then you come out through a door that's a shortcut back to the entrance, or that goes out a
Yeah.
shortcut out the other side
Yeah, I
of the
do.
mountain or something.
It really makes a difference to
Hmm.
gameplay rather than you have to like retrace your steps every time.
Like empty rooms that you've cleared out, yeah. Um, but also as well, it's a modular system. It's a result of how the game developers made the game. Only 10 people were responsible for all of the dungeons and caves in Skyrim. I think that's amazing. But it's because they were able to. There was a blog that we came across when we were doing our Skyrim archaeological survey, which talked about this modular system, almost like plumbing. You can have T bends and right turns and left turns and so on and so forth that create these narrative structures and stories within each tomb. But also as well, I think beyond the fact of how they were made, I think one of the most amazing things about this effect that they create is actually just uh, how immersive each one is. It's a level without having to have formal levels. I think it's a
Yeah.
so you can choose to go and do this sort of contained little adventure, and then you can go back to uh, randomly exploring in that sense. I suppose is that what keeps you coming back in that sense to the game? Is that what keeps it fresh? Is the fact that it's not actually telling you what to do at all times, but also as well, I guess the fact that you get better at the things you do in this game, don't you?
Yeah, I mean, I think the leveling system is, I mean, I know that it received a lot of criticism from kind of Elder Scroll fans prior to its, who were big fans of the like Morrowind and Oblivion kind of mechanism. But
Hmm.
actually, I mean, I think the fact that they made the leveling system infinitely easier to access. Like
Mm-hmm.
you didn't have to have prior knowledge going into this game about anything.
No.
You could just go in, feel your way through it, and figure it out as you went. And if you started, if you were using a bow for a while and you were like, oh, I've got this really cool sword, you could switch to using a sword, and you would level up because you would get better at the things that you did. And
Hmm.
it meant that your character was very, very flexible
Hmm.
in terms of gameplay.
Hmm.
And I think that's one of the things that keeps me coming back, is like I can go and just be like, oh, this is cool, let's give this a go. And you get better at the things you do, which is way more realistic in terms of like lifelike anyway.
Hmm.
But also I think the thing that keeps me coming back is the stories.
Mm-hmm.
Like there are aspects of the game that I enjoy less, so that I don't really like the dwarven ruins.
No. Mm-hmm.
I find them a little bit frustrating. I find them mildly irritating to navigate. I don't know why. I also don't like the Falmer, which are the main
Yeah.
antagonist within the Dwemer ruins,
Hmm.
and I just don't really like them really. Whereas, like, you know, I really love the like Thieves Guild and the Dark Brotherhood quests, and I really love day the Daedric quests.
Mm-hmm.
Is that
Mm-hmm.
what I'm thinking? Are they the Daedric quests?
But
Is
we
that the
get
right word?
weapons and armor and this kind of thing.
Yeah, so
Yep.
they're probably my favorite little quests. And unfortunately, once you've played them, like, so when I've come back to Skyrim and played them again, they
Yep.
just weren't as good because I knew it was going to happen. And it was just really, but the first time I played them, it was just like, the horror of being asked to kill somebody for a weapon,
Mm-hmm.
or the horror of like, like you've got to, like there's one where you've got to go and find a friend, somebody that trusts you, to
Yep.
come with them, and then you tie them to a stake
Mm-hmm.
and you destroy them with a blade called, I think it's called the Blade of Woe. And then you get the ability to go and kill all this cult people,
Mm-hmm.
and then you go and get to kill the champion of Boethia, who you become with the full knowledge that you've got this amazing ebony armor, which
Mm-hmm.
is absolutely amazing.
Yeah, when
But
you sort of sneak, a black cloud surrounds you, all that kind of thing. Yeah, yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah,
brilliant. And people get poison damage when they get too close and stuff.
yeah.
But you know full well that, like, basically until somebody else goes and finds her, that you're on a ticking clock there with this stuff.
Yeah,
And like the Mace of Malak Bal is quite
yeah,
interesting,
yeah, yeah.
where you have to go and find a priest, don't
Priest
you?
of Boethia, I think.
Yeah,
Yeah.
who's trying to cleanse the shrine of this evil lord, and
Mm-hmm.
then you bring him back and he's like, kill him.
Mm-hmm.
So you kill him with this rusty mace,
Yeah.
and he brings him back
Back
to
to
life,
life
and
and
you
kill
have
him
to kill
again.
him
Yeah.
again.
Yeah.
And you're like, oh my god, this is so horrible. But then you get the Mace of Moloch Bal and you're like, oh my god, this mace is so gross and amazing.
Uh,
And I
yeah. Or for example, there's one where a talking dog comes to you,
Oh
and
yeah, that's awful.
yeah, yeah, and you're given basically the Clavicus Vile is the
Yeah.
Daedric Lord for that one, and he's like, kill the dog, and I'll give you something amazing. And the dog's like, don't kill me. So I this time I decided not to kill him, and I ended up with the mask.
I think I think the mask is better than
Yeah.
the so yeah, you either get the rueful axe if you kill Barbas the dog,
Mm,
or you get the mask of Clavicus Vile if you don't kill the dog.
yeah.
But like the fact that you're asked to kill a dog was the bit where I was like, oh my god. And I think that was part of the joy of all of this stuff was the surprise
Mm,
element. And like the thing with the Dark Brotherhood that captured me is that like you get to a certain point and they're like, right, you need to figure out how to kill the Emperor. And I'm like, oh my god, yes.
I'm totally
I
on this.
I am on board with this, you know, and it's just fabulous,
Yeah.
like the scope is amazing, and you think you just, and that's the other thing is like you think you're just doing a little quest and suddenly it leads to this like amazing outcome and you're like, oh my god, how did this happen?
Yeah.
And yeah, it's that's what I love about it. It's that it keeps surprising you, keeps finding new things.
Yeah. Yeah. Now the thing is that there are those structured quest lines, but I think just what one I'd like to mention that's unstructured is a place called the Abandoned Prison. I was just walking through I was walking through Skyrim one day,
How
and
all great adventures start in
yeah,
Skyrim.
and there was this castle structure built into the side of a mountain with a waterfall flowing past. And when I went in, it quickly was clear that the structure was leaning, it was slanting. And bit by bit, it became clear that you sort of discovered the guards' quarters, and there's a note saying something like, the storm has destroyed a good portion of the castle. The water's pouring in. What shall we do? And there's someone says, the captain says he'll be damned if he's going to let these prisoners escape just because it's rained a little bit. But nonetheless, it's clear that the guards are out of there. And so you go deeper into the prison, expecting to find goodness knows what, maybe a whole load of drowned prisoners. But actually, what you find is a prison section that's filled with ghosts, because clearly a lot of people did die. But also as well,
Yeah.
a note talking about how this is our moment to strike. The storm has damaged the prison. Let's distract the guards and let's make an escape through the tunnel in my cell, says the note. And from there, I mean, there's a branch to the building that sort of takes you off to the left, and you can just sort of get a bit lost fighting ghosts, or you can find which jail cell the note was referring to, go down into the sewers under the castle, come out of the sewers, come up underneath the bridge that you just crossed when you first saw the castle, and you get this whole sense of, I wonder if people survived or not. Spoiler alert, there's a clue as to whether or not people survived in the sewers on the way out. But
But don't you also come out to a skeleton?
well, no, that was the spoiler. Yeah, there's a skeleton.
Oh,
Yeah.
sorry.
Okay, no, never mind.
I thought,
Never
sorry,
mind.
it's
Okay,
a
never mind.
12-year-old
No, it's
game.
fine.
I
It's
think
fine.
we
It's
could
fine.
talk
Yeah.
about it.
It's okay. I'll just never mind.
Sorry, I've just wrecked
Yeah,
everything.
yeah,
But I did
yeah.
also wreck the Dark Brotherhood quest.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. Well, that's the thing. Yeah. This isn't exactly an important major plot point, but the point is, it was a discovery that was completely player led. I found it for myself. I wasn't directed there by an NPC or by any text or anything, and you got a very strong sense of something unfolded here before I came here. And I think that's the thing. Speaking this question of returning to the game, what keeps us coming back? The thing that I most enjoyed about coming back to Skyrim this time has been the sense that I know this place. I've been here. I've in that sense lived here for many hundreds of hours, um, and that's a precious thing for a computer game to achieve. I think, because I mean, if we think about just quickly about the impact of Skyrim, I think one of the most obvious impacts has been Legend of Zelda: Breath of the Wild. I remember a few years ago, I was extremely excited at the prospect of an open world Zelda, but also
Yeah.
when they were talking about how Nintendo themselves were talking about how they'd been inspired by Elder Scrolls and by the structure of Skyrim. They were looking for a way to make a game that didn't direct you from dungeon to dungeon, didn't force you to do certain things in a certain way. And I think actually now the structure of Breath of the Wild, in terms of its interaction with the world, is the pinnacle. That is the goal to reach, I think, for future action adventure RPGs. It's not as rich, I think, as Skyrim yet, still, and it's not. It's funny. I think depending on my mood, I either want Skyrim or I want Breath of the Wild. So they're very different flavors. But
Yeah,
thing,
I mean, I would say that, like, I mean, I think Breath of the Wild did some things better than Skyrim
yeah,
and some things worse. So the thing I think it did better was it had like an in-game kind of driven incentive for you to go and seek out and explore all these little nooks and crannies, which is
hmm,
by giving you Korok seeds.
oh yeah, the Koroks to find, yeah, yeah, hmm, yeah,
Yeah. And that was beautiful. Now, Skyrim didn't give you anything like that. And I mean, it couldn't have given you
no,
Korok seeds in the way that it's set up, but you got kind of a sense of pleasure as a player, but there was no in-game reward for being like, you have discovered something cool.
no,
Cha-ching!
yeah, yeah.
And that I think was a lovely mechanism in Zelda Breath of the Wild.
Well, yeah,
But I also felt like the quests in Zelda were fairly limited. Now they weren't bad. Let's just say
yeah,
that. But they weren't always like a story. So you would go to a shrine, wouldn't you, and do a shrine, and you'd get a little boon for doing a shrine,
yeah,
and that was mainly what you were having to do. And there was a couple of other little quests where you could go find a white horse or
hmm,
there was a legend to explore. But I think in that regard, it was, and there was one that was really good, which I really enjoyed, which is where you helped this man make a town, and you
hmm.
had to go and collect people who would supply goods or like
The
become
Tarry
the
Town.
merchant in the town. Yeah. And like I really loved that, but I mean, I honestly think that the world of Zelda would have been made much richer by having much more of those kinds of things.
Well,
um
but it's interesting though because Skyrim, as you say, doesn't have though that actual reward for exploration. But you want, I think, you want to explore a bit more in Skyrim than you do in Breath of the Wild.
yeah, because you're finding something more substantial, I guess,
Well, but also
rather than a
something that isn't focused in on one point. I think one of the weaknesses of Breath of the Wild is the fact that everything is all about getting to the castle at the end of the game. It's all about
yeah.
that one thing. But I think the real strength, the reason why I say it's the pinnacle, is the relationship between you and the world, the physics engine, the weather, the lighting, the fact that you can play with. Well, you can start a fire and let grass burn, for example. All this sort of stuff has really rich potential, which I'm hoping in the upcoming.
Oh, and it made much better use of things like the clothes, didn't it? Because like
Yeah,
Skyrim has them loads of clothes you can get, but like you can walk into any town in Thieves Guild armor and nobody cares, or
no,
or in assassin's
well,
armor and
well,
nobody cares.
and we'll come back to that in a second when we talk about possibly what we want to see in future Skyrim as future Elder Scrolls games. But just to finish my point about Breath of the Wild, uh, I think I hope that they build on that in the upcoming sequel, Tears of the Kingdom. If they don't, it's going to be a lost opportunity.
Yeah,
To really build on that opportunity for richness, because they have environmental richness, but I don't think they have the story richness that Elder Scrolls Skyrim has. That said,
yeah,
though,
and I mean,
well, that's so. That
sorry.
said, though, I was sorry. I recently remembered this moment in Breath of the Wild where you can just light a campfire wherever you want to. I came across a campfire that was just somewhere in the landscape, and you can't light them. And
Well, no, you can light a campfire now with the adventurers pack.
okay, but so we'll come on to that next then. But it's interesting how that doesn't. I didn't notice that lacking until I'd played Breath of the Wild. If so, I mean, so there's been a
Yeah,
sort of incremental development.
and also I think as well, like the food in Skyrim
Yeah,
is a mechanism is not very good.
No.
Whereas like how you use food in Breath of the Wild is much, much better.
Mm. Mm.
Because that's one of the things in Skyrim is, isn't it? You discounting survival mode, you can literally not go to sleep ever.
Yeah. Yeah.
And never eat. I mean, I certainly never eat in game
No. No, that's a
or
good point,
cook
actually.
because it doesn't give me any boons. So I'm like, I don't care. And
Yeah.
so the only reason I would do that maybe is if I was setting myself a challenge.
Oh, sorry, that's something else that occurs to me, and in terms of this question of why we keep coming back, you reintroduced me, really, to the opportunities of alchemy and enchanting on this playthrough.
Yeah.
I realised that on my first playthrough in Skyrim, possibly because it just felt a bit overwhelming, I just focused on smithing, and magic when I became the mage, the head mage, the archmage.
Archmage.
And again, that's something we're going to talk about in a second. Is how you can be everything in this game, can't you?
Yeah.
But actually discovering and going through that process of doing that slightly unintuitive thing of I'll eat all these ingredients and see what they do. Because when you've got your ingredients and it just says at the bottom eat, you're like, really? Do I want to eat something that looks quite poisonous? But you said just eat everything. You'll start to discover what's what, and it's almost like you're creating an alchemical table of elements, or certainly a flow chart of how things
Yeah.
interact with each other. That's a richness again that was there to be discovered. That also you didn't have to do. That's one of the strengths of Skyrim, I think, was that you didn't have to do anything. You can just play the game purely based on the things that you're enjoying, and you'll probably be able to complete it.
I played the original Skyrim on the PS3, and then there was a long time before the DLCs came to PS3.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it really annoyed
was it a
me. And
timed
all my
exclusive or
friends who
something?
had an Xbox were playing them, and I was like, I'm not buying an Xbox. Although I nearly bought an Xbox, but I was like, I shouldn't be forced to buy an Xbox. And then I was like, I mean, I literally swore off PlayStations at this point because I was like, you're not giving me what I need. I only bought this so I could play Skyrim, and you had the better graphics card, and now you're letting me down. And I was just very upset. So I then played it through. So I rebought it with the DLC content a long time after everybody else had played it, and that was my like second big playthrough.
So that was Dragonborn, Hearthfire, and Dawn Guard. Yes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I mean the house bit wasn't the bit that, I mean, to be honest, it was all about the Dawn Guard for me because I think that's the best DLC. But I mean, I quite like the Dragonborn one as well. Dragonborn.
Yeah.
Is that what it's called? Yeah.
I think I'm currently on Solstheim. I think that's in the Dragonborn one. I think.
Yeah, the whole island of Solstein's the Dragonborn DLC. But yeah, so then I was like, oh, there's more to do. Because basically every time I play it pretty much until I've got quests that bugged out and quests that are just respawning. Like once you complete, for example, the Dark Brotherhood, you just spawn new quests over and over again.
Okay.
So that you can keep being an assassin. But like, actually, I didn't care about that.
Well, actually, I do. I remember that being talked about as a strength in 2011, that the game conceivably would just go on forever. It would just keep on.
Well, I can tell you it doesn't go on forever, ever, because eventually there's nothing more to find out.
Oh.
And so, like, and then I would go on the internet.
This sounds like you're a vampire. It sounds like there's nothing more to live for. I've read every book.
Shut up, man. Like, but then I went on the internet and it was like hidden quests, places to explore. And so I went and literally went to all these little places and found like, so there's one like quest where you have to go and sleep at a particular inn to trigger it. And there's another quest where, so there was like a load of different quests. Like there was a map place that was nearly off the map and you had to go a particular way to find it. There was like a little dwarven thing and like you couldn't find it otherwise. So there's like a load of different things I then went out and searched for. And so yeah, I then and the thing is, if there's nothing new to find and you're just wandering around and all the NPCs just say the same thing to you, you sort of come to like like the inertial death of the universe. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, that's what I mean. That's exactly what I mean by you're a vampire at this point. He's like, I'm immortal. There's nothing to to look forward to,
Yeah.
except the heat death of the universe. Yeah, well, that's true. But then along came this, and it wasn't the legendary. It was
Adventure pack.
anniversary. The
Oh,
adventure
is that
pack
what it's called?
that came with the anniversary edition. Yeah, adventure pack. It was released on the 10th anniversary of Skyrim, so 21/11.
Yeah, and I didn't
11.
know about it
No,
because I
no,
thought Skyrim was over, and then I found out, and I was like, purchase,
yeah,
and
yeah,
let the games begin.
absolutely. Still haven't got the adventure pack, I have to say.
Oh my god, it's
Uh,
so good.
but then again, as we've established, I never played the DLC because
Yeah.
yeah,
Well, no, but can I just say, not everything was good about the adventure pack.
mm-hmm,
Um, so you can get a lot more houses, and don't get me wrong, I love the houses. They
mm-hmm,
were all really cool extra houses. Like they were really cool houses. But one of the things that made the houses valuable was the work you had to put in to be eligible for a house. And
mm,
in this adventure pack, they kind of just give you houses. Like
yeah,
you get a letter and somebody invites you to come to dinner, and then you're like, and it's called like something Fang, and you're like, is this a vampire thing?
mm-hmm,
Am I going to be served up for dinner? And it's like, yeah, kind
yeah,
of.
yeah.
And but then you get a house, and I was like, this is the coolest house I've owned, and I've done like nothing apart from receive a letter.
Yeah, I have seen that
And
house. You showed me it, and it does look very cool.
oh, it's
Yeah,
so cool. And then
yeah,
there's another one. There's kind of like a few like that where they're like absolutely immense houses. Like I wouldn't not want them,
mm-hmm.
but they were given to me so easily. I was a bit annoyed.
Well, apparently the anniversary edition includes 74 Creation Club mods,
Yeah, which are
um,
the houses.
48 currently available ones, plus 26 new unreleased mods as well, that were included in the game. Uh, Essentially adding around 500 new gameplay elements, it says, to the game,
Yeah.
which itself is incredible in terms of the longevity of this game. And that, I mean, you make it sound as though, as much as you've just been saying that, oh, you're just given houses, it does sound as though it has added to the game for you.
Oh my god, I loved it. Yeah, like I mean, I really enjoyed the pets. So like I think I've got like 8 pets
Mm-hmm.
now.
Mm-hmm.
And like I didn't know that was a thing. You know, you sort of wander around, and then there's somebody like they're like, go find this thing, and you're like, okay, what is it? And it's like, would you like to come with me? And the thing's like, yeah, yeah, I
Yeah.
would. And then suddenly you've got this like bone dog following you around, which is like kind of hanging. You know, it's got like flesh hanging off it,
Yeah.
and it barks, and it's like a cute little
Well,
doggy,
didn't
except
you
it's
get a
gross
Dwemer
looking.
horse as well,
Yeah. Oh no, that wasn't even a pet. That
like a
was
robot
like
horse?
yeah, you had to go, you find the horse's torso that was so cool. You find the horse's torso in the ground, and you're like,
Mm-hmm.
what is this? And then there's a Dwemer ruin that I hadn't discovered before, and then you basically go looking around the Dwemer ruin, and you find all the parts of the horse, and you put it together, and it's a bloody Dwemer horse. And I was like, oh! And then I had also I got a dwarven armored mud crab, which was my favorite little creature to follow me around.
Uh-huh.
And I'd got the the horse, the little Dwemer thing, and I was sitting on my horse in my Dwemer armor, which I made specifically just so that I could be all Dwemer like related.
Mm-hmm.
And then I was like, yeah, check me out. And then I went off and did something else. But yeah, it was, that was a really cool mission actually, that one.
Well,
Uh,
I,
and there was a lot of stuff actually where there was like little missions, and then there was one you got to stop an assassination of the Jarl.
yeah,
I was like, whoa!
yeah.
So yeah, basically, it really did invigorate my game in the sense of like there was all this new stuff to do, and it's not like I don't enjoy the old stuff because I played through literally everything
Yeah.
again. So, but there was all this extra stuff that I was just like, oh, what's this? And there was like a follower where there was a really cool mission where it was called the Blue God.
Mm-hmm.
And there was like goblins in a cave, and they were worshipping, they'd been taken over by an orc that had basically painted himself blue and was pretending to be a god. And I was like, no, you're not going to manipulate these goblins.
Mm-hmm.
And basically got this like large goblin in a little fighting pit in the bottom, and then he can come with you.
Oh, cool. So
And
yeah.
he was a follower, and I was like, okay. And you try and talk to him, and he can't talk to you. And also I kind of got the impression with that you could probably take what was a very cool spear off him,
Mm-hmm.
but you probably had to get to know him a bit better, and I couldn't be bothered. So
Oh, well,
I was
that's.
like,
I mean, I suppose this because one of the things you've talked to me about in the past when it comes to Skyrim is how sometimes it can feel as though you're disincentivized to really, as much as the world is rich and it's filled with history and information and characters and stories that unfold and so on and so forth, you're disincentivized at times to really feel for people around you. So for example, you're incentivized to I mean, you described it as getting someone's trust, taking them to a certain place and sacrificing them in order to get a certain piece of armor. But also at the same time, I know that I'm going to do that to Lydia because she's an NPC and I don't particularly, she bothers me
oh yeah.
sometimes.
No,
And so,
this is my psychopath alter ego
yeah,
who thinks all the people that you're playing with are NPCs.
exactly.
You
Um,
know, but
but is that
but
is that
but
but is that not sort of possibly a weakness of the game that you get to
no,
because I think it's attached to this notion that you also get to be the head of the Thieves Guild, you get to be the Archmage, you get to be the Dragonborn, all in one build. You can do that one playthrough. You can do all this
yeah,
stuff.
no, I do find that annoying that you become the most important part of every single faction you
You're basically
join
the political, religious, and intellectual center of the
of
province.
Skyrim.
Yeah,
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 and the hardest warrior
yeah,
and this like legendary being.
yeah,
And it's like to Daenerys Targaryen, mother of, you are the Dragonborn,
yeah.
uh, listener of the Dark Brotherhood, Guild
Mm-hmm.
Master of the Thieves Guild, Archmage of the College of Winterhold,
Night-
etc., etc.
Nightingale.
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
and
that's
then
not even the. You
but
could
that
say Nightingale as well.
no, yeah, Nightingale. Well, also as well, then you get to be the representative of various Daedric lords as well,
Yeah, and
who
and
I'm
a.
sure are going to have a massive row over who actually gets to have
Oh
your
yeah, like
soul when
I've
you
totally
die.
promised my soul to like 6 people. I'm like, yeah, have it. It's
Yeah,
already nocturnals,
and
but you could have it too.
that's before you even started playing Skyrim. To be fair,
Yeah, that's
um,
true.
like, I had to get out of Nottingham. There were just too many
But
people.
no, I mean, I don't think. I mean, in terms of the morality of the game doesn't dictate morality to you. I think is what you're talking about within the game. I think you are able to make the decisions that you want. Now, as a player, have no impulse control
Hmm.
in the sense of like I have tried many times to play Skyrim with a character in mind who is not going to do some of the missions because they are good.
Yeah.
And about 5 minutes in, I'm like, but this is such a good mission, I can't miss it out.
Yeah.
And that's the problem. That is
Yeah.
the problem. Legitimately, is like I am morally horrendous in Skyrim just because I can't miss out on the good stories.
And that's the thing. I understand. Yeah, I get it.
But
And
I don't think that's a bad thing about the game. I think that is like a strength of the game in terms of the morality because it's not telling you to do one thing or the other.
well, it's not. But also at the same time, there's no real downside to doing everything. There's no real downside to doing everything,
Yeah,
and therefore I think,
yeah, that is true.
this literally just
You can do everything in a playthrough, can't you? Nothing that you do that's bad prevents you from doing something that's good.
no. And what's interesting is, and this literally just occurred to me, is that might be an argument for the old style of creating a character. Is that you start off with that intent, like a moral
No,
intent, for example. No,
no,
no, I'm not saying I want that to be the case, but what I'm saying is that you can see therefore why some people, if they're really wanting to do a role play and they're really wanting to be a good archer or a good, or a lawful, mage, then they are committing to it at the start. Now, maybe there's a third way. Maybe there's a way of encouraging gameplay that encourages deeper role play as opposed to to having to say what you're going to be from the beginning, or just having total freedom. But I
Yeah, I
guess,
mean, I think there are a couple of things where I think it would be better for you to have more consequences for um like committing crimes, for example. Like
yeah,
to commit a crime, like the guards will arrest you or you'll fight them to the death.
yeah,
But like for example, the bit where you kill the emperor's cousin, again, oops, spoilers, but there's a
yeah.
bit where you have to
I
go
didn't know
to
you did that, but okay, thank you.
okay, but there's a bit in Solitude where you have to go and kill the emperor's cousin so that the emperor will come to her funeral and join Skyrim so that you can then kill the emperor.
Hmm.
Anyway, um the guards kind of see you, know it's you, chase you out of the city, but the
Yeah,
next time you enter, it's like they never saw that.
yeah. No, exactly. But also vice versa. If you have a wanted status in a particular hold of Skyrim, the guards know immediately, and they'll just stop you in the street. You know, you can't put on a disguise. You can't change your clothes and go discreetly back into a town.
No,
Which
that's
is
true. That
which
would
is
be so good, wouldn't it? If you could like put on a imperial uniform and just pretend to be a
Yeah.
guard.
Well, that's the other thing that always confused me when I first played Skyrim, and even now. What is the function and the purpose of the Imperial camps and the Stormcloak camps in terms of how you interact with it? You can go into any camp and talk to anyone, and no one questions you, even if you've done things that might make you notorious to that faction. But also at the same time, there's not, as you say, there's not much consequence for wearing Stormcloak armor in an Imperial camp, or wearing Imperial armor in the heart of Winterhold, for example.
Yeah.
You don't really. Yeah, and this is where I think the clothes. You mentioned the clothes aspect in Zelda Breath of the Wild. The clothes really were quite well thought out in that game. You know, there's a clothes that make you
Yeah.
climb
I
better. There's clothes that
loved it.
exactly. There's a rubber outfit that makes you less conductive to electricity.
And there's a whole quest where you have to find a particular outfit to be let into a city,
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
which is one of my favorite little
yeah,
quirks
and it makes
of Zelda
sense.
Breath of the Wild.
Exactly, and it makes
It
sense in
does.
the world, and
Yeah.
you feel as though you've achieved something by getting one over on the guards. It's not a simple,
Yeah.
I'll pay you, or you kill me, or you take me to jail sort of choice.
Or I'll bribe you or I'll
Well, yeah,
persuade you to leave me alone.
exactly,
There's
exactly.
more boons when you've done more of it, actually, Mark. Just saying.
I know. Other thing, I'm just a wee bairn when it comes to Skyrim. I know, but also it's interesting to me, therefore, that the questions that this raises for potential in the future of the series. I mean, we already know that they're working on Elder Scrolls 6 Hammerfell,
Mhm.
and is this the sort of stuff that you would like to see come uh, into this sort of game? Because in that sense, I think Skyrim is going to be a a fantastic standard setter. It's always going to be one of the games that people go back to and point to as this changed things. Because actually, its predecessors, as I say, had those obvious weaknesses where Skyrim
Mm.
enabled so much within its world that it felt. I mean, I remember saying when I first played it, I said to my then fiance, now Mrs. Soup, I said, "This feels like grown-up Zelda." And really, what I meant by that was this feels like a tabletop RPG. This feels like actually you are consequential in the game. So Skyrim is always going to be important, but what can they bring into this formula that will help with that? I mean, so things like do you think clothing and disguises
Yeah,
would
I
be
think
one?
disguises, right? So one of the things that they added in with the Adventures pack
Hmm.
was you could get a cowl of the head of the Thieves Guild, who I've forgotten his name, but wearing it instantly turned NPC guards against you.
Interesting.
So they obviously is a mechanism within the programming where they could link behavior of NPCs to disguise.
The
So I
clothing,
would
yeah,
love the idea that like if you go and pay for petrol in a parking lot on a motorbike, you have to take your motorbike helmet off.
yeah,
Like I think that would be a legit thing. You're in a town, there's no peace. You
hmm,
can't come in with your helmet on. You've
yeah,
got to be able, like your armor. We've got to be able to identify you. And I think things like that would have added, and the fact that you're not allowed to, you've got to clean up a bit when you go see the Jarl.
Yeah,
You
yeah.
can't.
Well, because actually Skyrim has posh clothes. It has posh
Yeah,
clothing, but you just don't. There's no reason to wear it ever. It doesn't have an armor value.
and even when you have to pretend to be a chef, the only item of clothing you have to wear to be a chef is the hat.
You be clunking around in Daedric armor and have a
Yeah,
chef's hat
you
on. Yeah,
legit,
yeah, yeah.
and so I think it's an underutilized thing. And also, like, some of the stuff that you can wear was just stunning. Like, there was so many different types of armor.
Mm-hmm.
There were so many different types of like clothing and stuff. And
Also, you could
like, it
dress
would
as a
have been
peasant as
cool,
well.
like, if you dressed up as like somebody that was wealthy, you got robbed more often on the
Yeah,
roads.
exactly. Yeah, or if you dressed like say if you wore the ragged clothes that you find sometimes, maybe people give you money. They think you're a poor person.
Yeah,
You
yeah.
know?
Do you know what I mean? Like, they really could have,
You could be a
like,
beggar.
and yeah, it honestly was like something that I felt like was a missed opportunity. And then when they played with that cowl thing in in that adventurous pack, I was like, look, you could do it.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
you just, and all you would need to do is have it, and maybe even if it's a full set, not just like an item of clothing,
Mm-hmm.
that you would trigger these things. So like, if you walk into an Imperial camp in the full storm cloak thing,
Yeah,
you're clearly a storm cloak
soldier.
soldier, and not just somebody who scavenged together some armor.
Well, and at the very least, they would talk to you differently because
Yeah.
that's the other thing that I
Or if you had to wear like the Imperial armor while you're doing the Imperial quest line.
yeah, yeah, but that's
Like,
but that's the other thing that I struggle with in Skyrim is the fact that there's very limited responses from NPCs to your presence. So when you go into a bandit camp, for example, immediately people just attack you, no matter what you're wearing, no matter how you're behaving. It's always red dots appear on your compass heads-up display. Enemies are around you, they're coming at you, and then you and your follower have to defend yourselves.
mm,
There's no nuance to it. There's no subtlety. Um, but I love the idea of yeah, having context appropriate clothing, having a situation where maybe also this could help to solve the problem that we were just talking about in terms of freedom, but nonetheless encouraging deep role play. Would be that if you
mm.
go into a city and they recognize you because you have to have your helmet off, that is what frames you as and attaches your morality and behavior to your character. It also means you can go back into the city with a hood on, and there's an opportunity. In terms of maybe if your sneak is high, you can be a thief and get back in, and people won't know you and won't recognize you. But maybe that's a way of doing it. Is actually having this stuff actually follow you round in a sort of a. I'm thinking behind the programming, almost like a database
Well,
that's
yeah, because
attached
they
to your
because they
character.
already do sort of do that, don't you? Like, one, if you've got a bounty in one of, so there's 9 holds. If
Yeah,
you've got a bounty in one of the 9 holds, that doesn't affect the rest of them. It's like, it's
yeah,
not joined up, federated, like judicial system in
yeah.
Skyrim, is it?
No.
And then like, they yeah, they could have extended that. And I think that would have been, I mean, personally, I would have loved to do a bit more with the clothes and have them be a bit more um fun to play with.
Do you think, in that sense, in terms of again encouraging certain types of gameplay, that actually having fewer options for housing would help as well? In so much as the reason I say that is that I struggle actually putting down roots in Skyrim. So, for example, I am now the head of the mages college. Technically, I have the archmage's quarters to live in. I have
But as
Lakeview.
soon as you get that, like, there's no point going back.
Well, no, that's my point. That's exactly my
Yeah.
point. Yeah, there's nothing encouraging you to say, okay, this is my house, this is my home now. I live here. Cool. Okay. Or
Except when you get like kids and family.
well, true, but for example, I have Lakeview Manor, and also I have Breeze Home in Whiterun at the moment. Now, that's only
Yeah.
three main homes that I can live in. I have the option in the vanilla the vanilla, the anniversary. No, so
The DLCs.
no, not the DLC. There was an augmented Skyrim that was released on Switch before the anniversary version came out. It was I forgot what it's called now. But so I have the updated modern version of Skyrim, the modern build of Skyrim. So which means I can have, but unless the vanilla part that without the anniversary pack, that will let me have many houses. And I know, and I've seen that you've talked about how that gives you the opportunity to have different houses with different configurations. And that, in that sense, you don't have to choose whether you have a room for it to adopt a kid, or whether you have a library, for example, in your house, because you can have different houses more or less for different functions. But do you think it might be good to have that encouragement to sort of, because personally, I really want to. The reason why I haven't built any other houses yet is that I want to think of Lakeview as my home, and I go back to it, and I'm just sort of pottering, and I can do farming. When I go back,
Yeah, I mean,
I'm forcing myself to put on clothes like like an apron and stuff when I'm building. But I have to do that. That's not
yeah.
something that the game helps you or encourages you to do, and so you can feel very itinerant, can't you? You can feel as though everywhere and nowhere is your home in Skyrim. You've just got
Yeah,
places
I
where you
mean,
keep your stuff.
I think that's a it's twofold, isn't it? That it's
Hmm.
because you can do everything.
Hmm.
But also it's to encourage, like, it means you get a bonus, don't you, if you just do say one thing that would lead you to get a home.
Hmm. Hmm.
I mean, I don't know. I mean, I I find with all of the things that Breeze Home is the most useful,
Hmm.
because I basically that's got a real, like, it's got like a real concentration of places where you can sell stuff.
Hmm. Hmm.
And so, like, there's three places just as you walk into Whiterun before you get to Breeze Home that you can sell stuff.
Yep.
And then there's two places at the top. Breeze Home's right in the middle, and that's a real, like, so that's like I tend to go there, drop off the stuff I don't want to sell stuff, and then I'm ready to go adventuring again. So
Hmm.
that tends to be my place to store stuff. And then, yeah, I
There's also
think that,
the store hack that you taught me as well, where
oh yeah.
you can have infinite money in the store. Let's not spoil that for people in case people don't know, but I didn't know it. But yeah, you're such a master. Um,
I'm really not. Like, I'm genuinely not a master. I've not done any of the mods because I've never played it on a PC.
hmm.
So I've only ever played like the console version of the games.
Hmm.
And I'm not a master in the sense of, like, there are people out there that know so much more than me
Yeah.
about Skyrim. And so, like, do I love Skyrim? Yes. Have I
Hmm.
put a serious amount of time into it? Yes. But there are people that know a hell of a lot more than me.
Yeah. Anyway, so I broke your train of thought there. So Breeze Home has that location benefit. Yep.
Yeah. And then I tend to also have a secondary location, which is set up where I keep kids and a wife.
That sounds so dodgy.
Yeah. But right, the other thing I would say is, like, it's better to wife up earlier in game,
Yeah.
because every day you get 100 gold from your wife. But
Okay.
I say wife, it could be a husband, but I always end up with a wife. Actually, on my latest playthrough, I married a man,
Okay.
but I think the women in Skyrim are just so much better.
Yeah,
Like,
they're more
so
interesting, definitely.
yeah, I
Mm.
think it's, though, there's a lot of kind of inbuilt kind of, you're meant to be a man playing it.
Yeah.
Like, you probably haven't noticed this, but there's every so often where you get called him
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
or her,
Mm-hmm.
or she,
Yep.
from NPCs, even when you're playing with a woman.
Yeah. Well,
And
I think though, I think to be fair, I think some of that is also meant to reflect the. So if you're a cat or a lizard, people don't necessarily know.
that didn't happen to me because I was a
Okay.
Breton.
Oh, okay. Well, there you go then. Okay.
It was dismissed. And the other thing that annoys me slightly is that the mannequins in your home that you can store armor on
Yeah.
always default to male, irrespective of what gender you're playing.
Yeah. Yeah.
which is annoying because like some of the female versions are well better. Like I much prefer the female Forsworn outfit to the male one.
Mm-hmm,
So you
mm-hmm.
look really cool when you put it on, and then you put it on the mannequin, and it's like a man version, and you're like, don't
Uh,
have these gender differences if I
yeah,
can't, I can't show them.
yeah. Well, there's
And
the I think the steel armor, as much as it's not fully, real world, I think it looks better in the female version. Much more elegant than in the male version, certainly. I suppose one of the good things for Elder Scrolls going forward, though, is that oh God, I hate that phrase. I just used it. I used it going forward. Is that they've definitely had an opportunity to see that actually the cultural impact of the game is more than just teenage boys and PC owners. So
mm-hmm.
you've had Skyrim Grandma, for example. You know,
Oh
um,
yeah, she's awesome.
exactly. And so presumably the next game's going to have much more of a conscious spread of sex and gender representation and recognition. Hopefully, anyway. Hopefully, I think
Yeah, I mean, I
they'd be
hope
destined
so.
to do
I
that.
mean, it's a minor irritation,
Hmm.
that stuff, but it is one that I just think they could have just kept they just could have just flicked a line of code that meant that the
Yep.
mannequins
Yep.
were
Well, I
the
wonder
same
if there's
gender
been a
as
mod
you.
along those lines.
I don't know.
No.
Most of the mods that I've seen people play with are all really sexist as well. They just make all the women's breasts bigger, and they make the women wear less armor.
Yeah. Yeah. There was
And
also
I'm just, and then they play on the thing, and I'm just like, it's kind of misogynistic
yeah.
because like you're giving the women less armor because it looks pretty for you to play.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean
And
that is real. That is definitely an aspect. But oddly enough, to be fair, there are lots of mods that aren't just about boobs and bikinis. There are.
oh yeah,
Yeah.
no, there are some really, really good mods. It's
Yeah.
just one of the things that frustrates me
Yeah.
when watching YouTube channel that there just does seem to be this like, let's just make all the women a little bit more
Yeah.
sexualized.
No, yeah, yeah. Well, speaking of which, I starting to make the thumbnail for this episode, I finally have seen. I've not yet met her in the game, Serena.
Yes!
And when I was trying to
My
find,
sister-in-law sent me a message going, I finally decided I'm going to wife Serena. And I was like, you can't. And she's like, no, no. And I'm like, it's just a friendship. And then I was explaining to her, I was like, you heard her story about
yeah,
how she became like a vampire. Like she literally had an experience with Molag Bal himself.
yeah,
And like, you don't marry people after that. And
no,
Rosie was like, oh, but what happens? And I'm like, well, just think about it.
yeah,
Like,
exactly. um,
you don't need it to be explicitly explained, but she got trauma. And
yeah,
then when you offer her to become like, ask if she'll ever become a human being, she's like, well, I wouldn't even think about it that way. Like, why would I go through that to give it up? It's
yeah,
like, no.
yeah, yeah.
So yeah,
Well, so
she genuinely is the most fleshed out follower in game, like in vanilla Skyrim,
exactly,
that you can get, and people love her so much.
yeah.
And yeah, you can't marry her. And actually, I like that you can't marry her,
Well,
but
you can't marry, but
you
also
do sort of fall in love with her.
well, and that's clear from the internet search. In so much as I was looking
Yeah, I bet it is.
for an in-game model of her, unmodified, and it's really hard. It's really
Yeah,
difficult to find just Serena as opposed to waifu
Serena
Serena.
Plus.
Yeah,
Yeah.
white. Yeah, yeah. Serena plus plus. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Um, um, I suppose the question is, can there ever be uh, a perfect action adventure game? And how close is Skyrim to achieving that? Because all we've really been able to think about so far has been some environmental stuff from Breath of the Wild, which I think arguably Skyrim started in many ways in terms of how it
Mm.
interacts with it. So things like in Skyrim, you can actually push boulders down hills. And that was something that in Breath of the Wild, they made into like a tactical thing or into a game for the Koroks, that kind of thing. So you can push boulders down hills to hurt people, to hurt the goblins, or you can it might be there's a hole at the bottom of a hill and you go, ooh,
The
and you
Bodkins.
Bodkins. I thought it was no, it's the goblins, isn't it? Pretty sure it's
I think they're.
Moblin's at the Bodkin. A bodkin is a spear, I think. Tell you what, should we
I'm
Google this?
looking it
Yeah,
up.
Bokoblin. Yeah, exactly, Bokoblin. Yeah,
Okay, fine. It's dyslexia. I've obviously just read it as bodkin.
dyslexia versus lifelong obsession with Zelda. But like, who's the winner?
Yeah.
Who's the real winner? Yeah, who's the real loser?
I think I'm the loser here
Yeah,
based on
I
this.
don't know. I don't know. Um, so Skyrim began some of that stuff. But nonetheless, it's a small tweak to make that into something, to see what Nintendo have done with some of these environmental ideas and just put them into a new Elder Scrolls game. It's a
Yeah, and
relatively small
I
thing to
think
tweak the clothing and so on and so forth. And so therefore, is Skyrim close to being one of the best RPGs in that sense?
well, so I mean, I think it's definitely one of the best, if not the best.
Hmm.
I mean, I think there's been like, so Bethesda also made the Fallout series, didn't
Mm-hmm.
they?
Mm-hmm.
Which use a similar sort of engine, just in a completely different world.
Well, it's the
And
same
they're
engine.
really
Yeah.
good as well.
Mm-hmm.
Pardon?
It's the same engine. In
Yeah.
many ways, actually, that's
Uh,
one of the things that they've been criticised for, is not modifying their engine. But anyway, so go on.
oh, but it's so good.
Mm.
Like, it really works. And I
Mm-hmm.
mean, I really enjoyed the Fallout games. I didn't enjoy them as much as Skyrim.
No,
I
no.
just I think it's just because there's far more history and stuff in the Skyrim stuff. So there's just more information to find out. But I did enjoy the Fallout ones. And
Well, also,
yeah, and
actually,
I mean
just on that note, I think Fallout, there's an explicit implication that this is an extension of our world.
yeah, that's
If
true
nothing else,
actually.
in the songs, for example, on the radio, they're old
Oh
1920s
yeah.
records that we know. Whereas I think Skyrim, I mean, they have two moons in the sky, for crying out loud. You know, that it's a different world. Yeah,
And yet there's things like the Northern Lights, the
yeah.
snow, there's this kind of Earth-like feel to it,
Oh,
isn't it?
so actually, sorry, I just had a thought. Something that I thought you might be interested in. That I might have maybe meant to have mentioned earlier. But did you know that there's actually real world anthropology courses that have studied Skyrim? So
No.
they've examined Skyrim from, and this is where I think it connects to what you're saying at the moment, from the standpoint of how it uses and references Norse culture. How it plays on some stereotypes. So actually, one of the things that you were talking about gender roles, my follower, my companion at the moment is Mjol the lioness from Riften.
I hate Moyle.
And Mjol is problematic in so much as she doesn't complain as much, for example, about being there as Lydia does, which is fantastic. She
But
does.
she's saccharingly good.
Yeah, she's so exactly. She's so saccharine, but also she has a very limited number of things that she'll say, and she says these things all the bloody time. So, like, what was it? I don't
This
know
is
what
why I
it
need to
is,
be the
but
dawn guard.
I find the cold exhilarating. Maybe it's my Nord blood, but perhaps. And you're just like, shut up! And she'll be saying this stuff. And I know all followers do this, but she'll be saying this stuff in the middle of a conversation when you're trying to actually learn something from someone else. And she's just like,
Yeah.
my father used to take me hunting, and you're just like, shut up! So, what was I saying? Oh, that's it. Yeah, sorry. But there's an interesting moment in that, in terms of gender roles, where she says, my mother taught me sword handling skills. Can you imagine? She says. And I'm thinking, yes, I can bloody imagine, because this world is filled with female warriors. What are you talking about, Mjol? In fact, in Whiterun, there's an NPC who comes up to you and goes, "What's the matter? Don't like the sight of a strong Nord woman?" That kind of thing.
Oh, I love her. She's one of the best NPCs.
Well,
She called something the Unbroken.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. But there's that sort of, again, this speaks to this idea that actually maybe they're expecting a a young man to be playing it and to be going, oh my God, your mum taught you to et cetera, et cetera. But the relationship between these sorts of cultural touchstones and this anthropology course is fascinating, because they talk about how, on the one hand, actually they do draw on some real world Norse inspiration and culture, things like the Northern Lights, things like the long houses, the iconography of dragons, so on and so forth. worms and monsters. Sovngarde is obviously Valhalla, so on and so forth. And in that sense, that might be another reason why I found it easier to play this game and get into it than I did Oblivion, because Oblivion is more or less entirely fictional. It's drawing very loosely on an idea of medieval Europe, but it's made by Americans, so they don't really, they're not getting that. They're getting the slightly Hollywood glossy version of medieval, whereas Skyrim feels, again, the muted colors and the much more obvious early medieval cultural references there. But the point being is that the quality of the game and its interaction with landscape and architecture and mythology and so on and so forth has been so deep and so strong that it has become a touchstone for examining how modern people think about the Viking Age, which I find really interesting.
Yeah, that is really interesting, isn't
yeah.
it? So yeah, and this is the thing, I think, why you have to say Skyrim is possibly as near perfect as you might be able to achieve, in the sense that, it's buggy as hell.
Yep.
But the bug element manages to get it right, doesn't it? In the sense that it's just the right side of annoying to not put you off playing the game. But it is buggy. But I think that's inevitable based on the size of the game. It's permeated culture.
Yeah.
It's
I've got a physical metal septim here in my
of course you have.
Yep.
And you've got the Dragonborn action figure, haven't you? Which I keep looking at on eBay and going, oh my god, I really want it. And then I was like, can I copy Mark?
Yeah.
Is that a bit weird? And I'm like, yeah, it is, but I still want it.
Yep.
So I might still buy it.
Yeah, but it has it's become so important and it is such a touchstone that I kind of wonder whether it's possible to top it, and maybe that's why it's been so long. Because if you look at the gaps between the other games, Morrowind, for example, was released in 2002. Oblivion was 2006, so only 4 years. And here we are 12 years later without a new Elder Scrolls game. Now, of course, the joke is it's been released on everything. I mean, they even did an Alexa version, didn't they?
Yeah, they did. But no, I think the thing is, they've hit on like a perfect, situation here, haven't they? They've got a game that they've allowed people to mod, that's allowed a longevity, that's allowed it almost to bug fix some of the stupider annoyances within the game.
Yeah.
There's lots of different ways of playing it. It's fair. It still feels fresh in the sense of like, I don't feel like I'm playing a game that's 12 years old when I play it. And I think they've got a huge challenge on their hands in terms of producing something even to equal it, let alone supersede it. I do think, though, that if they put in some of the elements that made Skyrim wonderful, that will work. And the fact that they've been developing it for a long year gives me a long time, gives me hope that they might put some of those things in, because it doesn't take a short amount of time to develop all these little idiosyncratic peppering across landscapes and stuff and lore and things. That takes time to develop, to integrate into the landscape, to make it an immersive experience. And I'm hopeful that the extra time is allowing them to do those things well.
Yeah.
And to, have the scope of the kind of stories that we like, because I want basically Skyrim again, but with a whole load of different stories and things to find out.
Yeah, and I suppose we've seen what happens when they're not given time to really innovate, in the form of Fallout 4. Fallout 4 was criticised for not really building on Fallout 3 in many ways. It's still basically the same game. It's just got a slightly updated graphics engine. It's not. It's not.
Yeah.
but that's how people talked about it. And it's also, things like, okay, so now you've got the mech armor, but they didn't really, I don't think, thought about the implementation of the mech armor.
Yeah, I found that really clunky.
Yeah. So
And I
maybe
haven't even played that much of Fallout 4. It's on my list.
no, but it's
Gonna
interesting though,
happen at
isn't it?
some
You
point.
have started it, and in fact, you initially when you saw I had it, you were asking could you borrow it, and I went yeah, and you were surprised that I didn't want to hold on to it, as it were.
Yeah, yeah.
But that's the reason. You start playing it, and then you go, it just feels a bit, even though it's clearly a massive game. It's going to have all the hidden bits and bobs that we love. It feels somehow thin, a bit gruelish.
I think the thing that I found with it was that there was a lot of little bits to kind of get my head around.
Mm,
You know, like it sort of says, go explore this area and find this. And it's like, okay. And then you go looking around and you've missed a tiny little bit. And so you can't complete the objective.
yeah, yeah,
And there was little things like that where I was like, that's annoying.
yeah. Well, and I mean, just while we're on the topic, that also obviously led into the context of the development of games like Fallout 76, which has had a bit of a redemption curve. More people are playing it now than I think than ever before. But that was a studio wanting to make a game for release for the money as opposed to for the art of the game. So maybe we shouldn't
Mm.
complain too much about and also, yeah, if people are interested in 76, just go and look at some of the early reviews. I mean, it was appalling. But the maybe that yeah that maybe that's a reason not to complain too much about it having been 12 years. The problem is though it's still not imminent. They're still talking about it as in pre-production, i.e. probably not even on a computer yet. They're probably just doing paper because they're working on this. I think it's Starfield, basically an RPG in space.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean,
So it might
I,
be
I
another 5 years, 6 years out.
but I think because Bethesda have just been taken over by
Yeah.
Microsoft, we might see some changes happening
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
because I think whenever you get new eyes on a company products, you know, you can see from the outside looking in where improvements can be made.
Yeah.
And so I'm kind of hoping, I mean, it sounds like I really rate Microsoft.
No,
I
but
am
you've
pretty neutral about Microsoft, to be
yeah.
honest. But um, I do think that coming in as a with a fresh pair of eyes is something where you can provide feedback to people that are within a system that they've been working in for a long time and maybe see areas, and they maybe will have different priorities and things
Well,
like
different
that.
priorities,
So
but also they'll have they have a massive fuck off wallet as well. So they can
yeah,
come in and just say, do you know what? Develop Skyrim alongside this other game. Hire
yeah,
90,
they could.
another team. Um, so there's that
Yeah,
possibility as well. Yeah,
but then there's also the people that I think
not
worked
Skyrim, Elder
on
Scrolls.
yeah, but the people that worked on Skyrim have not necessarily come back to work on that. It's a new
Mm,
group of people.
yeah,
And again, new is not bad, but I think that whatever happens, I think there has to be a healthy place of love
yeah,
from what's come before
yeah.
and development to enrich, not frustrate.
Yeah, no, I agree. I agree. And also, don't because and in that sense, arguably, Elder Scrolls Skyrim was lightning in a bottle, as you say, maybe the right team at the right time, doing the right things in the right way. But if you're going to try and get close to that, presumably as well, I think you've got to remember that also Skyrim wasn't littered with, you know, with microtransactions, things like pay 50p to get this color armor, this kind of thing.
Oh yeah.
It's a meaty, solid game, and what they did was they served up in the DLC um, uh, extra courses of a substantial meal.
Yeah.
So it needs, yeah. So
But I
again,
do think like the modding thing
mm,
would be great actually if you could access that in consoles
yeah,
and have maybe like a rating system so you could add on little mods like this mod fixes this and you're like that really annoys me, purchase.
yeah,
You allow for game development that's continuous, that doesn't necessarily have to be done by the Skyrim, it's not going to be the Elder Scrolls team,
Yeah.
you know. And I think that, I mean, I certainly read or listened to an article at some point where they were talking about integrating the modding into the game design,
Yeah.
in the sense of like that had been the main thing that kept Skyrim going, was this modding community and
Yeah.
the fact that people were doing things with it,
Well,
and
actually,
that they wanted to keep the longevity and then therefore make that a more integrated process, which I was like, yes,
well,
do
well, well,
it.
well, for example, I mean, one of the mods that I couldn't think of before that's not about boobs and bikinis is uh, on lock picking, one that adds little scratch marks to the lock
Mm-hmm.
at the different key points where you're likely to be able to unlock a lock. So between 9 and 3 o'clock, on the circle. And it's a small thing, but it meant that if you're playing PC and you don't have rumble feedback, it gives you a little bit of a higher possibility of being able to not waste a load of lockpicks. Just, it's a tiny little mod, but as you say, that's the sort of thing that could be a convenience element, that if they made it so that it could plug into console and PC versions, people could decide, well, actually, for me, in terms of, it's an accessibility concern, arguably, in many ways. These days games are often praised for having high contrast modes or certain sound possibilities or input possibilities that help people who, maybe they have a disability, or they're colorblind, for example, access games.
Mm-hmm.
But just being able to just say, well, actually, I just need a little bit of help with this part of the game, and then go to a
Or
store
even,
and
it's not
find that.
even, I mean, I think it should be about the flexibility of the game. It's like, I'm not interested in spending time picking locks,
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, yeah,
like, just make it easy, because
yeah.
it's like, you know whereas somebody else might be very interested in that skill.
Someone
Like,
might want to be a farmer.
yeah,
Yeah, I think
you
this
can
isn't
be a
something.
farmer with the
So,
new adventure pack.
oh God, I need
I
to
have a
tell.
farm, a
You can
steward,
farm.
and I've actually rescued two beggars by giving them useful work on my farm, and they now have a stable to sleep in, and they work the land, and then every time I go back home, I get lots and lots of extra stuff that they've grown, and I can choose what to plant, and I get the excess and money.
So
Love that.
in other words, no, I haven't played enough Skyrim. Um,
Yeah.
but but I think having the opportunity to customize the game in a way that would maybe make an economy or an adventure mode, aspects of the world that meant that you could, for example, do a trading with. You could farm and then trade with a nearby town that wasn't managed behind the scenes, and you're just going to someone who is, who is your what's the word? Your the person who
Contact.
no, the person who manages the farm. Um,
Steward.
your steward, yeah. Because really, what that is you go away, numbers change, you come back, you get money. But it'd be really cool if you could actually
And produce.
and
So
produce.
you could plant death bell
Uh huh.
and come back and get extra death bell.
Yeah. No. And you can do that in your arboretum in your
No,
houses
no,
as
no.
well.
No, no. You don't have to pick them. They stay picked. They stay there lusciously. So you could go and pick everything
Uh huh.
and then go to the excess farm like cupboard.
Hmm.
And then there's loads of other stuff.
Okay, that's cool. That's cool. But you don't have to put it in a cart and take it to town and negotiate on a price for it and so on and so
No.
forth. So I think if there were ways of plugging in into the
Well, actually,
game.
I think the new thing introduced survival mode,
Hmm.
and I think survival mode is one of those things. I mean, to be honest, I haven't played it,
No.
and I'm surprised I haven't played it, because it was always one of those things that I thought while playing, oh my God, wouldn't this be cool if I had to like stop and cook my dinner and
Yeah.
like then make sure I was sleeping enough. And then the second it was available to me, I was like, oh, but I'd have to stop and cook my dinner and like make sure I
Yep.
had a bed, so the psychology in there for me was just not there. But like,
But is that the point though? Are we actually after a life simulator?
so I think survival mode is really interesting for like a little challenge. So I've seen people play it on YouTube where they're like, I want to survive 100 days in survival mode with just this or something. Yeah, that's really interesting. And there's a level of realism to it in the fact that like when wolves come up and attack you, you die.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
if somebody hits you with a knife, you die because that's because you're human, basically. Well, not human, but you're humanoid enough for it to be like a mortal blow.
Yeah, you're not a demigod.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
you don't level up as quickly, and your weapons don't cause as much damage, and you lose health if you don't sleep, you lose stamina if you're hungry or whatever it is, whichever way around it is. And yeah, if you're too cold, you start losing health. And so I think there is a place for that. I'm very glad you could toggle it off because, as it turned out, when provided with that option, I was not interested, even though I thought I would be. But do you know what I might do is I might start another game and just see if I can just poodle my way through being really, really lame.
Yep. I guess
Like
that's
a
one.
non-combat character.
Yeah, that's one way of putting it. Yeah.
But no, but like I do think that's true because like you can go through the whole game and not swing a weapon.
Yeah.
Like you could be a poisoner and a pickpocket and put poisons in people's pockets and be like, slowly die from this prolonged poison, which will take 2 health off you for an hour.
Yeah, or imagine if there was a way, and I'm sure this is possible algorithmically, if you could create a letter or a note that acts as an instruction that makes someone, an NPC, paranoid, or makes them go and makes them jealous of someone else, for example, that kind of thing, in a way that's a bit more subtle than just you have ticked this box and now this part of the story starts, but something where you can actually, almost like a slowly building aspect of paranoia.
Yeah, I think one of the things that does come out when you play it a lot, actually, is even though the NPC's dialogue is very rich, it's not quite rich enough, is it?
No,
exactly. It isn't, because the characters very quickly start repeating, and every time you go back, it's more of the same.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
and in
some ways, I'd rather in those instances, sorry, that the characters just shut up. Actually, they don't always have to talk to you. Everyone, everyone says, my wife. Someone, you'd be walking through the street, and goes, my wife wanted to move here. I don't know why. I don't like this town at all. And you're like, who are you? Why are you talking to me?
Or, do you get to the Cloud District much? No, of course you don't.
Yeah. What am I talking about? What am I thinking of? Of course you don't. Yeah. And you're like, dude, I just came from there.
And also, he's one of the most hated NPCs in the game.
Yeah, well, because he's a snob.
Yeah,
absolutely. What about?
Also, it looks like his wife is having an affair with somebody else in Skyrim.
Oh, naughty. Okay, finally, what about, if we're talking about creativity, etc.? What about the opportunity to make in-game objects so take enchantment, for example, and apply that sort of approach to artifacts that aren't obvious candidates.
Yeah, so I would love a stealth build. Like, I'm not even joking. I was trying to figure out, and I don't think you can do it very well without mods. But what I wanted to do was basically get some like peasant garb.
Yeah.
And make it like really cool functioning armor.
Precisely. Yeah.
And and then like maybe have, I don't know, a fork. That was like, or even just the gloves of the pugilist, but in like nice decorative gloves, so that you could be like, look like this pretty harmless creature that's badass.
Got this amazing
punch. It's gonna cause some scars.
Exactly. You could have you could maybe make books that when you open them, something happens to to the person who's open. You could lay them down as traps, for example, to get a
Look
librarian.
for the interested scholars.
Yeah,
Ooh, what's
exactly.
in this
Yeah,
book?
and then it explodes in their face.
You
Um,
could just do it to the orc in the College of
yeah,
Winterhold or what?
exactly. Yeah, yeah,
I
yeah.
found this book. Would you be interested? And he looks up and he's like, his tusks are burning.
Exactly, exactly. Also, but I mean, beyond that, though, there's also the possibility. Just think, really, blue sky thinking. Of, I wonder what it would be like to be able to import, either import or somehow have in game the ability to, for example, there's clay. There are clay deposits in the game in
Yeah.
Skyrim, at least. So in a future Elder Scrolls, maybe the opportunity to to mold things, to make shapes, and basically, I'm thinking you could make like a ceramic pipe, for example, or it's basically to mold and form the world around you a little bit more, such that you can
Um,
actually then enchant that stuff, and then
I'm listening to you
yeah.
with the glee on your face, this creative opportunity, and I'm
Yeah.
thinking, I have zero interest in this
No, no, no,
idea.
no. No, but I know you do. But then I mean, I said a pipe, but you could have a bit of silly fun and make a ray gun, for example. That shoots magic. You could really sort of like make this because the reason why I'm saying this is that there are D&D expansions that bring in modern world stuff. So there are like time travel opportunities in D&D
I don't
where
want it.
no, okay, fair
I
enough.
would do the time travel, like, because you sort of do that with the Elder Scrolls, don't you?
Hmm.
Like their time traveling things where you go back and look at them.
Just imagine going forward though. Wouldn't that be weird as well to see
No, because that would break physics.
that? What and the flame wielding doesn't break physics.
No, listen, everything in the Skyrim world is
Yeah,
kosher,
yeah.
but traveling forward in time is not.
Oh, okay, fair
Oh
enough.
no, I suppose. Okay, let's rephrase. You can travel forward in time as long as it's in pace with everything else in Skyrim.
How do you mean?
You're traveling forward in time right now.
Oh fuck. Yes. Yeah. In the
Oh
same way,
yeah.
the 3D movie is actually a four-dimensional movie because there's the aspect of the image changing through time.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
People do not understand dimensions.
Do you know, I love and also hate the fact that you're a physicist. It's just there's sometimes it's so funny how sometimes it stomps down on whimsy. Other times though, you're completely off there. You're like do this is amazing. You bring in all sorts
Do you
of
know what
random
though?
stuff.
I also find that because I like to write stories, and I often find that my understanding of physics
Yeah,
stops me
yeah.
from being more creative. Because like somebody will come up with an idea, and I'll be like, I would never have thought of that because that just doesn't work.
Mm-hmm.
And like for some reason in my head, creative ideas have to work, and I'm like, it's a limitation that
Yeah.
doesn't need to exist in the world of fantasy.
No, I'm not.
So yeah.
I'm not criticizing you, but I'm saying it's interesting
Oh
how
no,
and
I'm
when it
criticizing myself.
but how and when it applies fascinates me.
Oh yeah, because it's completely illogical.
Yes, exactly. So we're talking about a game where you can play as a humanoid cat, and you're like, no, to the physics, like traveling forward in time, no. But I suppose the reason why I say that is that given that we were just talking about the real world inspirations for what Skyrim became in the game as opposed to what it was talked about, how it was talked about in previous iterations of the Elder Scrolls. Basically, they definitely drew on Norse culture for so much of it. That implies that there is a future, like 1,000 years hence, within Elder Scrolls that might
That
look
looks like Scandinavia.
that might look like in the Industrial Revolution. And they might look. I wonder what. Given that we've also got a world where the Dwemer have already been through an industrial revolution. That's
Yeah, very
interesting,
interesting. That
and
is very
and
interesting.
and they could have the potential for
And
what.
that knowledge is lost.
Yeah, yeah. Either the knowledge is lost, or there's the opportunity for a head start on an industrial revolution. Steam
No, I meant the
engines, and
Dwemer's knowledge was lost.
but you can
Like they don't understand how they did it, did they?
no, but they're there to be studied. you
Yeah,
know,
yeah.
and there are people in the game studying it. Like I say, there's the Dwemer Museum, so you can have a really interesting
Yeah, but
possibility.
I'm not being funny, right? One of the Dwemer Museum is like rubbish. If you've been anywhere in Skyrim,
Yeah,
like you've discovered all of that stuff plus more,
yeah,
and you've melted down half of the stuff to get like dwarven ingots.
yeah, yeah,
Like,
yeah.
and this guy's like, "Will you show me an arrow?" I'm like, "I've used 20,000 of these arrows to kill Farmer."
Well, there you
And he's like,
go.
"I'll pay you 8 gold," and it's like, just get out of your little
No, well, but there
box.
you go. You are a one man, one woman, one person, uh, walking potential for industrial revolution right there.
Yeah.
but that
And you
but
could have this lofty expertise if you just played more Skyrim.
oh yes, indeed. No, I know about that stuff. I've already done that stuff. But the yeah, but I wonder. I mean, they're not going to do it. It wouldn't happen. But just sort of like almost like a head canon. It'd be interesting to see. Yeah, the equivalent of the 20th century, 21st century world in on Tamriel.
Yeah, I mean, that would be interesting. I I wonder when they're going to set things, because like one part of the interest for me is actually the fact that it is kind of historical in nature,
Hmm.
and that technology isn't as it is now.
No.
But yeah, I mean, I suppose it could work, couldn't
Hmm.
it?
Well, yeah.
But you could just have a Sheikah slate
Yes. Well, yeah. I guess Sheikah Slate is it's a similar
or a mobile
expression.
phone
Yeah, it's a similar
or
expression.
one of them things from Fallout that's on your wrist. What's that called? Your
The
pal,
Pip Boy.
the Pit Boy.
Yeah, Pip Boy. Yeah. But in that sense, they've already got soul gems that basically act as small energy batteries, basically, and that's one
Oh
of the
yeah, but
ways.
it's so much more unethical than a battery.
No, it is definitely more unethical than a battery. But they used it's clear that the Dwemer were using them as batteries to drive their technology.
Oh yeah.
So you can see, maybe they start to suck. Anyway, sorry, we're getting off into complete fan fiction here now. So I'm just gonna let's leave that there.
How did that
I
happen?
don't know how that happened. But what are we talking about next time? Do you know?
So next time we are talking about the Addams Family.
Yay!
Da-da-da-da.
Yeah.
Da-da-da. So we're gonna basically, it's in honor of Wednesday, isn't it? That we absolutely adored.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm
And
sure we will find many things to criticize.
well, I'm sure we will. Well, I'm sure we have because folks at home, we've already recorded that episode. Yeah, it's been interesting this month. But anyway, that's
Yep.
coming. That's coming in the next episode. So yeah, there's something to look forward to.
Yep. The multiverse calls the diner back to its swirling depths. The warm conversation and cosmic mystery must depart for now. We will materialize again, somewhere new in time and space. But for now, it's goodbye from the Elf Realm
Elstrealm
Diner.
Diner.
Realm.
More than anything else in her life, she wants to see Paris.